Yu and Joe began to say that in order to do good and make the world filled with love and peace, every home should have a child like Cherin. Her friends got the same strange supplies, and Yu and Joe proclaimed the official name of Cherin's fan club as Vitamin C. Ji Hoon was surprised and embarrassed. He asked if she was joking about it. Yu and Joe replied with a serious expression that it was serious and that there were a lot of fan clubs in the world. She said that even the flying pasta monster has one, and how much worse is Cherin. She thought that Ji Hoon thought that the girl didn't deserve it. Ji Hoon wanted to say something, but Yu and Joe interrupted him. She held the somewhat indignant Cherin by the shoulders and said that it was no surprise that people admired her and that Cherin's fandom would soon spread across the planet. Ji Hoon was embarrassed. He didn't know at what point he should have convinced the woman. Now was the time, but Yu and Joe spoke so seriously about it that he was speechless. Yu and Joe said that her friends were the first official members of the fan club and these amazing girls would help with the shopping today. The women continued to be touched by Cherin's appearance and Ji Hoon did not understand if this was normal at all. Finally, they reached the store. Chang-soo asked if the women would have time after shopping because they could order chicken and drink a glass of beer. The women thought it was too much. Yu and Joe pulled her husband's collar and asked him to mind his manners at least a little bit. She was indignant at Chang-soo and told him that she was ashamed to study at the same university with him. Her friends were not interested in him and the woman told him to stop hitting on her. Chang-soo was embarrassed because he hadn't done anything wrong. Yu and Joe whispered to him that if he behaved well, she would introduce him to her other friends. Chang-soo's eyes lit up when he heard that. He happily jumped to the others, and the woman thought she shouldn't have invited him. But without Chang-soo, she wouldn't have been able to meet Ji Hoon. Ji Hoon is the only guy in the company, and he will try to leave as soon as possible. Yu and Joe found a nice shop and invited everyone else to go. Hwang Soo-young picked up a dress and said that it would look perfect on Cherin. Kim Tae-young picked up a slightly different dress, which she thought was simple but beautiful. Yu and Joe smiled and said to take everything to try on everything. The women began to choose a huge number of clothes. Ji Hong was embarrassed to think that they had just started and he was already tired. Cherin began to try on everything they had chosen for her. First, she stood in a light dress that Hwang Soo-young had chosen, and the woman thought it was very cute. Then she put on a knitted vest chosen by Kim Tae-young, who thought it was comfortable and pretty. Then Cherin tried on a dress chosen by Yu and Joe. She looked like an aristocrat from a palace with a small hat. Ji Hong was amazed that everything looked incredible on his daughter. Chang-soo said that it spelled their Cherin. The women looked at the girl. Kim Tae-young asked if there were too many colors. Yu and Joe replied that the girl needed such things. They couldn't decide which outfit was best for her. Yu and Joe asked the girl what she liked best. Cherin thought about it and replied that she liked everything. The women began to argue. Ji Hoon thought that he wanted to go home. The women decided to choose the outfit Soo-young suggested. The man was happy that they had finally decided and he could go home. Then Chang-soo suggested going to another store. He said that maybe they could find an outfit that each of them would like. Ji Hoon and Cherin were embarrassed. The women agreed with Chang-soo's suggestion. Ji Hoon did not understand how his friend could let this horror continue. Also, he could spend more time with the girls. Cherin turned to her dad and asked if they would be done with the choices today. Ji Hoon hoped so. The women were delighted. Even the old-style dress looked great on Cherin. Enjo thought that she should buy all the outfits she had chosen. Her friends agreed with her. Ji Hong smiled and said he would pay for everything. He had no idea how much everything cost, but he was ready to do anything to get this over with. The man went to the cash register, but suddenly Enjo handed the saleswoman her card. The surprised man asked what she was doing. The woman explained that as the president of the Cherin fan club, she had to pay for her first shopping spree. The man said that she would spend all the money on it and he would gladly accept her offer, but he would rather pay for it himself. Eunjo told him not to worry, because she had earned enough money in 10 years to be able to afford such purchases. Then Chang-soo said that he would pay for the dinner, because most of all, fans dream of having dinner with their favorite. Injo clapped her hands with joy. Ji Hoon turned to Cherin in embarrassment and asked if she wanted to go out to dinner with his friends. The girl happily replied that she would go anywhere with her daddy. Then the man promised to buy her some goodies. He felt as if he had fallen into a trap, but he still had to repay the help. The group went to a coffee shop. Injo thought it was a big mistake to invite Jang-soo along. Ji Hoon didn't understand why he had to be so humiliated. Cherin was embarrassed to ask why Jang-soo's uncle was acting so strangely. Jang-soo was approaching the embarrassed and indignant Dae-young. He really thought it would work. The woman turned to him. She said that his words were completely boring. This hit Chang-soo right in the heart. He was embarrassed and asked if things were really that bad. Tae-young replied that even her old father would not have said such a thing. Suddenly, Soo-young looked at something in surprise. She told Ji Hoon that ever since they met, she had been thinking about how clear his skin was. The man thanked her embarrassedly. Injo said that he looked much better now than before. Cherin smiled. Ji Hoon asked her not to say that, because sometimes people say stupid things about him getting married. Tae-young replied that they probably say that because he's well-groomed and attractive. Jang-soo looked at her in disappointment. She added that she thought Ji Hoon was a model. Soo-young added that now she understood why Cherin was so beautiful. The man was embarrassed and said that it was the first time he had ever been complimented like that. Jang-soo looked at his friend and thought it was too much. After all, they had rejected him, calling his joke stupid, but as soon as Ji Hoon opens his mouth, women smile. He also wanted to be popular with the ladies. After that day, Jang-soo thought seriously about his image. The men were at the university. Jang-soo said that Ji Hoon should remember the day they went shopping. The day when everyone didn't like him. Ji Hoon pretended not to understand. Ji Hoon said that he was embarrassed by his friend's clumsiness and asked him to tell the truth. Chang-soo was upset. Ji Hoon asked him not to despair and that the next time they met, he would tell him that his friend was just not good with women. Jang-soo clenched his fist angrily. He had been worrying about this for several days. Finally, he realized that looks are important. So he told Ji Hoon that he would start playing sports with him. The man was embarrassed. He didn't understand who said this to Jang-soo. He refused, because if Ji Hoon trained, there would be no one to look after Cherin. Jang-soo began to say that he couldn't do it alone and begged his friend to save him. Ji Hoon started running away from his friend and said how dare he make such a cute face, and said that there was no way he would help. Jang-soo ran after him and asked him to help. Ji Hoon thought that Jang-soo would calm down after he refused, but he kept begging him throughout May. Jang-soo brought Ji Hoon a box of cookies and said that he must be hungry. He said they were sweets from the bottom of his heart. Ji Hoon was shocked. He asked Jang-soo why he hadn't stopped, since it had been weeks. It was a waste of time and he always leaves with nothing anyway. Jang-soo looked at his friend with pleading eyes and said that this was the reason why he could have already agreed. Ji Hoon indignantly replied that he had said many times that he couldn't because of Cherin. Jang-soo thought about it. He asked his friend if he had forgotten everything. Chang-soo shed a tear. He reminded him that Ji Hoon couldn't eat properly because of his work and studies, and he always brought everything he needed. Jang-soo dramatically asked why Ji Hoon was treating him like this now. Ji Hoon thought that when Jang-soo said that, he wanted to return the favor, but Cherin came first. Suddenly, someone advised the men to find another way. They turned around in surprise. It was a professor. He said that while he was studying with Cherin, the boys could go to the gym. Ji Hoon asked if the professor was sure about this. Choi Woo-hyuk dramatically replied that Jang-soo had always looked out for his friend, and how could he ignore that fact now? Jang-soo told Choi Woo-suk that he was the most attentive professor. Ji Hoon was embarrassed to thank him for his concern. Then the man asked that Jang-soo promise that if he ever started whining, Ji Hoon would not study with him. Jang-soo confidently told his friend not to worry, because he had no concept of giving up. And so, thanks to the professor, Ji Hoon and Jang-soo were able to train together. A week later, Chang-soo said he couldn't do it anymore. Ji Hoon asked if his friend had forgotten his promise and said that he shouldn't give up so easily. Tired, Chang-soo began to say that he had never held anything heavier than a spoon before and Ji Hoon was being too hard on him now. The man began to tell his friend to stop fooling around because it was an easy exercise even for him. Jang-soo was outraged. He grabbed Ji Hoon and started to say that he must have drunk some kind of energy drink that gave him so much strength. Ji Hoon asked him not to talk nonsense. He said that there was no point in him hiding anything because they were training the same way. Cherin added indignantly that her dad was not a liar. Jang-soo was embarrassed. He didn't understand why he was so tired. Ji Hoon smiled and said that he would pick up his friend at the same time tomorrow. Then he thought about it. Ji Hoon hadn't practiced for a long time, and he didn't understand why he felt so easy. At the time, he thought he was among the 0.04% of sports geniuses. But it was not so. The reason Ji Hoon adapted to the sport so easily was Cherin. Once again, there was a glow in the room. Cherin wanted her daddy to be healthy. The girl sat next to Ji Hoon, who was sleeping. She asked that her daddy not be tired anymore and told the light to make him stronger. Cherin wiped her forehead and said that the restoration magic should work. She wanted to test it today. She thought she should do the face first and then the weight loss, but Daddy had already lost quite a bit during the training. Nevertheless, there were still some imperfections. A shining magic book floated above the smiling girl. Now she could move on to the next step. Cherin was choosing among the idols looks the facial features for her daddy. She happily assured herself that she could do it. She touched her daddy's nose. She wanted to make it even more beautiful. The girl was embarrassed. She could not believe what she was seeing. Her magic was so strong that Ji Hoon's face literally shone. She really wanted to see how much more handsome her daddy would become. Cherin hugged him and hoped he would dream about her. 3 weeks after the start of the training, the two men met again at the university. Ji Hoon was embarrassed to say that it was impossible because they were doing the same exercises. He didn't understand how Ji Hoon had gotten so much better looking. The man blushed a little. He himself gradually began to realize that he had become even more handsome. People say that losing weight is better than plastic surgery. Ji Hoon has changed a lot since losing weight. Even in his school days, when he was thin, no one praised his appearance as much as they do now. Jang-soo tugged on his friend again and tried to find out how it happened if they were doing the same workout. Ji Hoon didn't know either. Their friend started saying that life was unfair and that Ji Hoon had always been handsome, they just didn't notice it. Jang-soo was hurt by this truth. Professor Choi Woo-hyeok came back with Cherin and asked why there was such a crowd outside the lab. The men replied that they were just discussing Ji Hoon's beauty secret. Choi Woo-hyeok laughed and said that it was an interesting topic and that he also admired Ji Hoon's looks. The man thanked him in embarrassment. The professor then asked if Ji Hoon would like to be the face of their lab. The man was embarrassed and very surprised. Choi Woo-hyeok smiled and said that from now on, Ji Hoon would represent them everywhere. The man asked in confusion why they were talking about this at all. The professor looked at him closely and asked him what activates in the brain when we see something beautiful. Ji Hoon thought about it and answered that the adjacent nucleus. The professor then asked what would happen if it was activated during a lecture. The man replied that everyone would become more interested and have more fun, as if they were at a party. Choi Woo-hyeok excitedly told Ji Hoon to think about what it would feel like to be at a party during a lecture and how well it would work. Ji Hoon thought it sounded absurd, but incredible. Although no matter how much he thought, he had little faith in the effectiveness of this method. Ji Hoon did not understand what had happened to his appearance. Cherin stood behind him and smiled. She was happy because everything was going according to her plan. Under Cherin's guidance, Ji Hoon was getting more and more handsome every day. The weather was clear outside. 2 pairs of men's feet stood side by side. Ji Hoon told his friend that he was wrong, and Jang-soo assured him that he had grown. He noticed that they used to be the same height, and now Ji Hoon was taller. The man could not understand how this was possible. Jang-soo asked if it was the training. Ji Hoon was also surprised. A girl stood behind them. She said in embarrassment that she had been watching them and asked Ji Hoon for his number. The men were surprised. Ji Hoon apologized in embarrassment and said that he already had a child. The girl was a little upset. The man said that this was not a reason to refuse, but the truth. Jang-soo asked if she hadn't heard of Cherin, his daughter. The girl apologized in embarrassment, and Ji Hoon said that it was okay and there was no need to apologize. The girl left, and Jang-soo said that he should probably have an operation. Ji Hoon said that his friend shouldn't talk nonsense and suggested that he finish the reports because he still had to go to Cherin. Jang-soo said that this was too much and he would definitely run away somewhere and Ji Hoon would work alone. The man replied that he would only make Cherin angry. Jang-soo replied indignantly that his soul was wounded and he didn't think that Cherin and her anger. Suddenly, a joyful little girl ran up to them and said that she missed her daddy very much. Ji Hoon replied that he missed her too and asked her if she had done her homework. Cherin ran to her dad and said that she had done it. She asked if Ji Hoon had finished his reports and if they could go out this weekend. The man replied that Uncle Jang-soo had promised to help, but now he said he was going to run away. Cherin was surprised by this news. She turned to Jang-soo and asked him, almost crying, if he was really going to run away. The man replied that he didn't even know because he was angry with her father. Cherin said with pleading eyes that she was looking forward to this weekend, and if he didn't help, then. Jang-soo thought about it. He smiled and agreed to help if they had dinner together as planned. Cherin was happy. Ji Hoon said that he knew Jang-soo would not be able to resist. They sat down at the table and Ji Hoon asked him to concentrate so that he could finish quickly. Jang-soo agreed. Suddenly, the man was surprised when he looked at the papers. It was much more complicated than he thought. It was going to take longer than he had planned. Jang-soo smiled and said that the task was not difficult and in his opinion, there was enough work for 30 minutes. Ji Hoon embarrassedly told him not to be a jerk. Jang-soo offered to bet. Whoever finishes last pays for dinner. Ji Hoon agreed. Cherin wished her dad luck and said she would be rooting for him. Ji Hoon thanked his daughter for her support. The girl asked her father to become even smarter, and the man replied that she had given him even more strength. Jang-soo felt defeated, even though they hadn't even started yet. Jang-soo felt like he was burning with rage. He could lose in anything, but certainly not in intelligence. After a while, Ji Hoon asked how long Jang-soo would be writing. Cherin said she was hungry. Outraged, Jang-soo thought that Ji Hoon was cheating because it was impossible to solve everything so quickly. Ji Hoon told him to stop looking for a trick and finish quickly because Cherin was hungry. Jang-soo asked him to wait a little longer. He finally finished and said desperately that he shouldn't have argued. Ji Hoon smiled. He said that he would pay for the dinner himself and they would pretend that there was no agreement. Jang-soo beamed with happiness. Ji Hoon asked him to be more modest. Suddenly, Cherin turned to her dad in embarrassment. She asked Daddy to have dinner at home because she wanted Daddy to cook something for her. Ji Hoon replied that it was true that sometimes they only ate store-bought food. But what if they had already promised Uncle Jang-soo to have dinner together? So he suggested that Cherin cook a lot of goodies this weekend. The girl was excited and asked her dad to promise her that it would really happen. And Ji Hoon promised. Cherin ran forward happily and said to hurry up because everyone was already hungry. Cherin enjoyed her dinner and received her promise. Ji Hoon was surprised at how generous the restaurant owner was because she always gave them a free extra. Jang-soo confidently replied that it was because of him, because he comes here often and the owner knows him. The owner turned to her husband and said that the girl was eating very nicely. The man replied that he wanted to watch this forever. Cherin ate happily. It was very tasty. Jang-soo did not even realize that the restaurant owners brought them free food just because Cherin was eating so nicely. The morning of the day off, which Cherin had been waiting for, came. She opened her eyes. Her dad was still sleeping, so she started to wake him up because the sun was already up. Ji Hoon didn't want to wake up because it was still early in the morning. Through his slightly open eyes, he saw Cherin blurrily. The girl said that if her daddy didn't get up, she would paint his face. Ji Hoon suddenly woke up. He reached out to the surprised girl and objected. Ji Hoon pressed Cherin to the bed and said that his strong hug would prevent her from doing it, and he could sleep a little longer. The girl indignantly began to say that her daddy should stop spoiling her and get up, because he promised to cook her something delicious. Ji Hoon replied that it would be right away. The man opened the food cupboard and took out some canned tuna. Suddenly he was surprised. The cabinet was definitely taller. Had he really grown that much? Ji Hoon sliced carrots and thought. He stopped growing in the 3rd grade of middle school. He decided to go for a physical examination and find out. The man returned to Cherin and said that he had everything ready. The girl happily peeked out from under the covers. He happily handed her the tuna rice balls. Cherin was happy. Ji Hoon watched her eat and asked how she liked it. Cherin replied that it was delicious. She happily thanked her daddy for keeping his promise and said that this one would be the best. Ji Hoon smiled. He was glad that Cherin liked everything. Then he suggested that the girl have a good time tonight. Father and daughter came to the amusement park. It was a wonderful walk under the May sky. Everyone was dressed very nicely, and everyone was looking at something in amazement. Everyone was captivated by the beauty of Ji Hoon and Cherin. Yet they stood out from the crowd. Cherin thought that Daddy was even more handsome and that it was good that the massage was helping. Of course, she wanted to say that it was her magic, but it was too early. Ji Hoon asked if the girl wanted to go on an amusement ride. Cherin was surprised. Then she said that there was one. The girl pulled her surprised father's hand and said she would show him. She came back to the axe ride again and said that last time they hadn't been able to ride it. But now it was taller and they should do it. Ji Hoon was not so sure. The man looked at the ride and hoped they wouldn't die on it, because safety comes first. Then he pulled himself together and thought that he couldn't be afraid in front of his daughter. And then he doubted again, because they could have died. But in the end, he agreed. Ji Hoon smiled and told Cherin that she was as brave as her daddy. The girl was happy and said that her daddy was the best. They went on the ride. Cherin was having a lot of fun, and Ji Hoon was almost dying of fear. When they got off, the man thought he was going to throw up. Cherin was looking at the map of the amusement park. She happily showed her dad the brochure and said she wanted to ride everything. Ji Hoon didn't understand why children were being advertised such dangerous rides. The girl looked at her father, and she suspected that he was scared. The man embarrassedly replied that he was not and suggested that they move on. He thought he was brave, but he felt quite differently. His life was definitely in danger. The roller coaster was next. Ji Hoon was mentally begging to be saved. On every loop he asked for it. Cherin, unlike her frightened father, was having a lot of fun. Ji Hoon's legs were shaking with terror. He wanted to go home. Cherin said that it seemed like they had ridden all the rides. She happily asked her dad to go on the rides that she was not allowed to go on next year, because she would be older by then and they could go on them. Ji Hoon mentally disagreed with this. Suddenly, a woman approached them and asked if Cherin was Ji Hoon's daughter. The man replied that he was and asked what happened. The woman said that she was the scriptwriter of the series Love Poems, Farewell Songs. She said they would look great in it. Ji Hoon was embarrassed, saying that they were not actors and how could they do that. The woman replied that the director wanted to add naturalness. It was nothing complicated, they just needed to ride the ride with their daughter. Ji Hoon asked if Cherin wanted to do this and said that it should be fun and she might be on TV. The girl was surprised. She happily replied that she wanted to be on TV, just like the idols, and she wanted to be a part of it. There was a film crew near the carousel. People in the crowd were talking about how they were about to be filmed in the series Love Poems, Farewell Songs. Ji Hoon was riding a horse with Cherin and thought he hardly ever watches TV, so he had no idea what they were talking about. But it seems to be a pretty popular show. Cherin turned to her dad and said that the woman sitting in front of them was very beautiful. The man replied that she seemed to be the main character. He thought that they would definitely be featured because they were sitting right behind this woman. This thought made him nervous. Someone from the film crew asked everyone to smile more naturally. Everyone on the carousel smiled. Ji Hoon asked Cherin, embarrassed, if he looked natural enough. The girl said that he looked just fine. The shooting began. The carousel kept spinning. The director thought it turned out better than he expected. He was worried because he had to shoot an emotional scene in a public place, but the main character did a great job. Suddenly, he noticed some of the extras. He thought they looked gorgeous and very natural. He thought of using this scene as an advertisement. The director looked at Ji Hoon and thought that he was so handsome that he could be confused with one of the main characters. And the girl who was with him was the best actress on the set. It was the perfect shot, just as he had intended. The director thought about it. He imagined receiving the award for Best Scene of the Year. Suddenly, a man told the dreamy director that the main character was not in the shot at all. He embarrassedly replied that he would have to reshoot. His assistant was upset because they were going to finish early. Ji Hoon and Cherin occupied the director's thoughts, so the shooting was delayed. The main character was crying dramatically. The shooting ended and the director praised everyone. The fans shouted to Park Yoo-mi, the main character, that she was the best and they loved her. Ji Hoon was filming Cherin from the carousel and asked her if she had a good time. The girl replied that she really liked it. Suddenly, they were back in the spotlight, and everyone thought that Cherin was a new actress because she was in the movie with Park Yoo-mi. Ji Hoon thought about how Cherin always attracted a lot of attention. He thought his daughter really looked like a star. The female scriptwriter asked them to wait. The man was surprised and asked what was wrong. She handed them an envelope and said that they had forgotten to pick up the money for the shoot. Ji Hoon was surprised. He said that he hadn't even thought about it, and maybe he shouldn't accept it. The woman replied that of course he should, because they had taken up his and his daughter's time. She happily asked to see their next episode, because they should see how great they looked on camera. Ji Hoon gave Cherin an envelope and told her that this was her first paycheck. The girl was very happy about it. The man asked her what she wanted to do with the money, maybe buy something tasty or a new book. The girl was surprised. She thought about it. Cherin happily replied that she wanted to put it in her bank account or buy stocks. Ji Hoon was stunned by what he heard. He asked if the girl even understood what it was. Cherin, looking very smart, replied that shares are units that create capital in a joint stock company. Ji Hoon mentioned that his daughter was a genius and was already in high school at the age of 7. But stocks seemed too risky to him. Even the brilliant scientist Newton became bankrupt in this way. He imagined that Cherin would fall into depression if he lost. The girl told her daddy that if he was worried, they could buy the most stable stocks. And then she could make a profit. Ji Hoon didn't understand why she was so confident about this profit. He thought that he had been right to warn Cherin about the problems she might face. And now was the perfect opportunity to do so. He told Cherin that he would set up a brokerage account for her and that she could invest this money, along with the money he had given her for the new year, in stocks. The girl was happy. Ji Hoon warned her that if she lost all her money, her account would have to be closed. Cherin agreed. As they had agreed, Ji Hoon opened an account for Cherin. Cherin wanted to buy stocks as soon as possible. The man asked her if she remembered her promise. The girl smiled happily and promised to fulfill it if she lost money. Suddenly, she asked her father indignantly why he thought she would lose everything and why he doubted her. The man replied that he believed in her. The girl told him not to worry and to support her. She would earn so much money that she could even give it to her dad. Ji Hoon said, embarrassed, that he didn't want her money and suggested that they go out to eat or have fun. Cherin replied that once a month she could spend it on entertainment. Ji Hoon was to blame for spoiling the girl. And if she loses all 200,000, it will be a good lesson for her. Ji Hoon was having fun in the park with his daughter, opened a bank account for her. And then the day of the dissertation defense came. Ji Hoon handed the professor a sheet of paper. Choi Woo-hyuk adjusted his glasses and began to read. Ji Hoon was a little nervous. He had made 10 changes since last night until this morning. Ji Hoon hoped that the professor would like the thesis, although he thought his hopes were vain because the professor was known for being strict. The man stood in front of Choi Woo-suk in embarrassment and thought that there were quite a few flaws in the thesis. The professor thought about it and replied that the work was quite good. Ji Hoon was surprised to hear that. The professor replied that the man should have realized by now that good means good and nothing more. Ji Hoon thanked him. He could not believe that the professor liked his work. The man thought about it. Everything had been too good these days. His dissertation, his presentation, and even his sports training. He hoped he hadn't used up his entire supply of success. The more Ji Hoon thought about it, the more everything seemed strange. The doubts that were already plaguing Ji Hoon reached their peak when he went for his physical. The man was shocked to learn that he was 177 centimeters tall, as he had stopped growing in middle school. He had never been taller than 5 feet 9 inches and 9 millimeters. The doctor explained to him that sometimes men continue to grow at a later age. Ji Hoon thought about what she said, because it meant that he had been growing all along. However, since middle school, he had grown only 1 millimeter, and now suddenly almost 6 centimeters. After 10 years, he grew, lost weight, and became more handsome. Ji Hoon did not understand what this incredible change was. No matter how much he thought about it, he could not find any logic. The man had to understand what was happening to him. But he didn't know where to start. After the medical examination, Ji Hoon told his friends about everything. Jang-soo told him that he had grown up. And it seemed like it happened in a few days. The man couldn't understand how this was possible, because he hadn't grown for 10 years, and then he suddenly stretched out. And his eyesight improved. One of his friends said that it was really strange about his eyesight. Jang-soo replied somewhat indignantly that this is the human body, because somehow even cancer patients can recover. Then he suggested that Ji Hoon ask the professor about it. The man replied that he had already asked him, but the professor just laughed it off. The two men began to discuss that Ji Hoon should undergo an additional examination. Jang-soo thought it was not worth spending money on such nonsense. The two men argued, and Ji Hoon thought that he was really worrying about it for nothing. Things had changed for the better, so he should think positively. He thanked his surprised friends for listening to him and said that Cherin must have been waiting for him. Jang-soo grabbed his friend's hand because he was about to leave them. With shining eyes, they told Ji Hoon that today would be the debut of his acting career and in a popular TV series. The man was embarrassed and said that he was only there to be an extra. The men knew that Ji Hoon was sitting behind Park Yoo-mi. He regretted telling his friends about it. Ji Hoon said irritably that he had to go, so the guys would watch the episode themselves. But his friends wouldn't let him go. They couldn't let this chance go to waste. Jang-soo begged Ji Hoon to join them. The man thought his friends were stubborn. He sighed and promised to watch the episode after they had dinner. The men were happy. Jang-soo even watched the entire series for one episode. Ji Hoon could already feel how much his friends would tease him. It was already evening outside. In the show, a man was offering someone cocoa. Cherin was glad that the commercial was over. Everyone was looking forward to seeing what Ji Hoon and his daughter looked like. The man had never felt this way before, but now he was excited. He thought they would be shown for 5 seconds, because they were just extras. Jang-soo whispered to Ji Hoon that he was a little worried. The man was surprised. Jang-soo began to say that today's episode was going to be very sad. But he would have to stare at a man who looked like a squid, and now he would call Ji Hoon that because he was in a shot with Park Yoo-mi. Then the man was slapped again. Ji Hoon happily replied that Jang-soo was lucky because Ji Jin was there. Jang-soo replied that Ji Hoon was too violent. The dramatic scene of the show began. Everyone was looking forward to the scene in the amusement park. After 20 minutes, everyone was still waiting. Another 40 minutes passed and everyone started to get bored. Jang-soo said that the episode would be over soon, and Cherin asked why it wasn't on. Ji Hoon was surprised. The scriptwriter promised that the episode would be released this week, but they weren't there. The girl was upset. Ji Hoon thought that this scene was probably cut out and that Cherin would be very upset about it. He was almost crying and begged to see them for at least a second. Suddenly, the scene with Ji Hoon and Cherin began. The man was glad that they were not cut out. Jang-soo was surprised that they were actually sitting behind the majestic main character. He said it would be a great memory for the girl. Cherin was happy to be on TV. Suddenly, Ji Hoon was embarrassed and pointed to the screen. They were shown in close-up, as if they were not extras but the characters in the series. The two men were surprised to see them in the final scene of such a popular TV show. Jang-soo said that it was indeed Ji Hoon's debut. The father and daughter were smiling. The man was uncomfortable because they were just extras. Suddenly, Jang-soo said that Ji Hoon and Cherin were trending. The girl was interested, and her father was surprised. Jang-soo couldn't figure out whether they were in 6th or 7th place. Their highest ranking was 6th, and they were the key to the series. Jang-soo started to say that they were showing Cherin in general, and Ji Hoon was just in the frame. The camera couldn't capture even 1% of her beauty, and Ji Hoon was just photogenic in his opinion. The man started kicking his friend angrily and saying that he could help Jang-soo become photogenic by simply taking him to a plastic surgeon. Cherin happily supported her dad and tried not to say anything in front of him. Their friends thought that watching Chan-soo being beaten up was much more interesting and maybe Cherin would soon become famous because she was trending. Ji Hoon replied that Cherin was cute and pretty, but not everyone can become popular. He couldn't hide his enthusiasm. Of course, the man didn't mind, and if the girl liked it, he wouldn't have any objections. He asked Cherin if she wanted to be on TV more often. The girl looked at her father in surprise and asked if he would be with her. Ji Hoon replied embarrassedly that he couldn't. Then Cherin indignantly replied that she did not want to. One of Ji Hoon's friends said that such a brilliant girl should become a scientist and work for the benefit of humanity. Kneeling down, Jang-soo told Ji Hoon that he had recently lost weight and become more handsome. The man embarrassedly told his friend not to exaggerate. Chan-soo said that Cherin could become famous, but Ji Hoon would be nothing more than her manager. The father and daughter were outraged. They could hear Jang-soo screaming outside, and Cherin was telling him that her daddy was very handsome and she couldn't keep quiet about it any longer. The man, who did not know that Ji Hoon had become more handsome thanks to Cherin, paid for it with a severe punishment. The filming of the mass scene, which seemed like a one-off, took an unexpected turn. The man looked at his phone in surprise. He did not understand what it could mean. The internet is a place where something is always happening. People rely on anonymity to persecute others. Now Ji Hoon and Cherin are, so to speak, the fairy healer meme. They became volunteers and helped people who faced online harassment. Ji Hoon looked at the phone screen. He said in embarrassment that their popularity continued to grow. Cherin was admired by everyone, positive comments were written about her, but Ji Hoon was embarrassed that her photos were freely circulating on the internet. The man thought that Cherin would stay in the trends for a few more days, and everyone would forget about her. He decided not to worry about it and prepare for the lecture. He was sure that this would be the end of it. Ji Hoon was wrapping up his lecture on artificial intelligence. He said he was ready to answer questions and asked if anyone wanted to ask anything. Everyone in the room raised their hands. The man was embarrassed. He had given quite a few lectures, and this was the first time he had encountered so many questions. Ji Hoon turned to someone in the audience and asked them to ask questions. The girl said she wasn't sure if she could ask such questions. The man asked her not to worry and to ask questions. She asked him if he was the one in the healing fairy meme. Ji Hoon was stunned. He didn't understand what she meant, and the girls in the audience whispered that he was even more handsome in real life than on the internet. Questions about the show started pouring in. Ji Hoon apologized in embarrassment and said that he would only answer questions on the topic of the lecture. The questions did not stop. The man thought it might be better to just answer them and not waste time. He asked the surprised audience to remain quiet. Ji Hoon explained that he and his daughter had recently appeared as extras in the TV series Love Poems, Farewell Songs. He thought that this was more than enough to satisfy the curiosity of the audience. But once again, the embarrassed man was bombarded with questions about the series. Ji Hoon smiled and thought he should have kept his mouth shut. Contrary to his expectations, the healing fairy meme was only gaining momentum. As usual, the sky was blue over the university. Jang-soo showed Ji Hoon the publications and told him that he was a real star. Ji Hoon was surprised. He didn't understand what that meant. In the post, someone talked about the meme's father's visits to the school. Jang-soo said he was also shocked. Ji Hoon didn't understand why they were doing this, because no one was interested in news that wasn't about celebrities. Jang-soo was surprised by the number of likes on the post. There were just as many comments. Jang-soo was thrilled that it had become the top story of the week. Ji Hoon opened his phone and was surprised at the large number of new followers. Suddenly, some girls noticed him. They handed Ji Hoon a sheet of paper and asked him to sign it. The man was frozen with surprise. He embarrassedly signed it while the girls praised him. They also took several photos with him. Ji Hoon could not understand whether he was dreaming or not. A crowd of autograph seekers came to them. Jang-soo was happy that his friend was so popular. Ji Hoon asked his friend if he didn't think it was strange, because he expected something like this with Cherin. Jang-soo joked that he must have been bewitched by the magic of popularity. Ji Hoon asked him not to talk nonsense, at least for now. Jang-soo replied that it was good anyway. Suddenly, he was surprised. Yona had written to him. She asked him if Ji Hoon had forgotten that Ji Hoon's birthday was in 4 days. The man was very surprised. Jang-soo asked what happened to him and widened his eyes in surprise. Ji Hoon did not hear him. After a while, they were sitting on the terrace. Jang-soo finally found out the reason for Ji Hoon's surprise, as he hadn't even started preparing for his birthday yet. He didn't like celebrations and was so busy that he had forgotten about it. Jang-soo told him that the biggest disappointment in his life was that his parents had forgotten his birthday. Ji Hoon looked at him in surprise and replied that he didn't even remember Jang-soo ever celebrating. The man replied that usually in elementary school, they organize whole tea parties on this occasion and asked his friend not to upset Cherin and to prepare for the holiday. Ji Hoon replied that this was the problem. He did not know how to organize everything. He wanted to impress Cherin because it would be the first birthday they would spend together. Jang-soo said that for her age, it would be nice to have a party. Ji Hoon replied that Cherin doesn't go to kindergarten and doesn't have any friends. Then Jang-soo had an idea. He suggested asking for advice on the internet, since it was popular now. In such cases, a collective decision is a good option. Ji Hoon clenched his fist and replied that it seemed like Jang-soo hadn't gotten his ass kicked in a long time. Jang-soo asked him to calm down, because someone would be able to film it and post it on the internet. Ji Hoon was desperate. Jang-soo advised his friend to just ask Cherin what she wanted. The man replied that the girl was smart, so she would immediately understand what he wanted. Then Jang-soo suggested that he take a walk around the mall and see what Cherin was interested in. It was worth at least a try. And so, on Jang-soo's advice, Ji Hoon decided to go with Cherin to the mall. The man suggested that his daughter go shopping. Cherin was surprised at the suddenness of the suggestion. Ji Hoon began to imagine that they would buy new outfits. The girl replied that they had already bought a lot last time. Then the man said that the clothes were for him, but then the girl noticed that he had ordered them online. Ji Hoon laughed in embarrassment and asked why Cherin didn't want to just go for a walk. The girl smiled happily and replied that she wanted to go for a walk with him. Ji Hoon noted that it had been a long time since they had gone out and eaten different foods. Cherin agreed and said that they could also buy a birthday present. The man smiled and said they would buy a gift. But suddenly his smile began to fade. He realized that Cherin had guessed right away. The girl was happy. Cherin had a lot of fun. She was thinking about what to buy him for his birthday, a toy or a book. Ji Hoon was a little disappointed that there would be no surprise. He was almost in tears. He didn't understand why he thought he could handle it. He couldn't even convince his daughter to just go to the mall. Ji Hoon thought that he always messed things up with stupid things like this. He thought it was his fault, because he should have thought things through better. Cherin asked her dad what he thought Auntie Yeji's son would like best. Ji Hoon was surprised. He asked if she was talking about the doctor from their lab. Cherin replied that it was her son's birthday and they needed to buy him a present. The man was confused and asked how Cherin knew it was the boy's birthday. The girl replied that she learned about it in the laboratory. Everyone there is friends with her. Ji Hoon remembered that Cherin's existence was much more important to them than his. In any case, he was glad that Cherin didn't suspect anything. He could still surprise his daughter. The father and daughter arrived at the store. The boy was lying on the floor, hysterical because his mother wouldn't buy him what he wanted. The woman said that last time she had bought him the same toy. The boy objected because the toys were from different series and his mother just didn't understand. Ji Hoon was watching. The mother dragged her crying son to wash his face. This was a common situation for parents who came to the mall with a child. Ji Hoon thought that there was nothing wrong with that, and that children are children and they are characterized by such behavior. The man began to worry, because Cherin had not been able to choose a gift for Dr. Yeji's son for an hour. The girl asked her father's opinion about the toy. She asked how he liked it, because it was the toy from the last episode. Ji Hoon embarrassedly agreed with her. Suddenly, the girl was a little upset. She said she wanted to buy a gift, but she had no money. She didn't know what to do. Ji Hoon told her not to worry and said that he would buy it himself, and then asked if Cherin wanted anything for herself, because there were so many toys. The girl replied that if she wanted something, she would say so. Ji Hoon thought that he was talking to her like a child, and Cherin was responding like an adult. Perhaps he would like his daughter to cry like that boy. Now he was definitely stumped. He had no idea what to give Cherin. Ji Hoon thought that there was nothing wrong with her adult behavior, but at times like this, it didn't help him. The girl asked why her dad hadn't bought anything for himself, since that was what he had come here for. Ji Hoon was surprised. Cherin said that it was all very strange. Ji Hoon began to worry. Cherin beamed with happiness and asked if Daddy couldn't think about shopping because he was distracted by her beauty. Ji Hoon replied in embarrassment that Cherin was really so beautiful that he could not see anything but her. Fortunately, the girl didn't catch on. Cherin hugged her dad and said that if he didn't feel like it, he should go home. Ji Hoon didn't know what to say. The girl said that her legs hurt. The man had to agree. Happy Cherin and sad Ji Hoon walked down the escalator. They were going home, and the man still didn't know anything. Except for today, there were only 2 days left until Cherin's birthday. Suddenly, the girl pointed to something and said she wanted to go there. Ji Hoon was surprised at first, because it was a grocery store. Suddenly, the man remembered that Cherin loved his cooking the most. The girl took out some vegetables and said that they reminded her of the rice balls her dad used to make, although simply fried vegetables are also delicious. Cherin told her dad that she wanted him to make more and asked if they could buy vegetables and make rice balls again. Ji Hoon smiled and told her to pick whatever she liked. Then Ji Hoon finally realized that he could prepare a surprise for his daughter. And that's how he came up with the best gift for Cherin. It was already dark outside. Ji Hoon looked at the different dishes. There were many things he could make with the foods Cherin had chosen. He chose a main dish and thought he should make her favorite rice balls. Ji Hoon wanted to find a recipe for 2 days and decided to talk to Jang-soo about it. Since he had been cooking a lot lately, he was getting better at it. Ji Hoon told himself to be more confident and raised his hands in the air. Cherin had long been asleep at this point. There were various dishes on the table. Ji Hoon's friends looked on in awe. They could not believe that the man had cooked it himself, because it looked perfect. Ji Hoon was pleased with himself. Jang-soo began to joke that maybe it only looked perfect, but it would not taste good. Ji Hoon indignantly replied that everything that looks good tastes good. He offered his friends a taste. The boys wished each other a good meal. Ji Hoon waited anxiously. The men were delighted, they were speechless. It was much tastier than the food they had bought. They asked when Ji Hoon had learned to cook so well. Jang-soo said that he wasn't joking and it was really delicious. He was sure that Cherin would love it. Ji Hoon thanked him embarrassedly. The two men joked about Chef Kim bringing them more of his food or cooking at their house. The man asked them to stop. He was glad his friends liked it. It meant that everything would go well tomorrow. Now the main obstacle was to organize a surprise, because Cherin woke up early. It was already dark outside. Ji Hoon sat on the bed and thought that he should be the first to wake up. He was afraid that on the occasion of Cherin's birthday, she might wake up even earlier. He set the alarm for 5 in the morning. The girl might wake up from the sound, so he put the phone on vibrate. Ji Hoon was lying in bed and thought that the rice balls needed to cool down, so he would start with them. Then he planned to move on to the main course. And just in time for the girl to wake up, everything would be ready. The man wished the girl sweet dreams and promised that he would make the best birthday party for her. Morning came unnoticed. Ji Hoon wiped his eyes. The warm rays of the morning sun were blinding him. He heard sounds coming from the kitchen. Ji Hoon thought that someone was cooking. Suddenly, the man jumped out of bed at the thought. Ji Hoon finally woke up and realized that something was wrong. Ji Hoon did not understand what was happening. It was 8 in the morning. He began to worry, because he didn't understand why he woke up so late. His surprise was spoiled. Suddenly Ji Hoon looked at something in surprise. There was a pot on the stove. Cherin was standing there in her apron with a knife in her hand. She was glad that her father had woken up. The man was trembling with surprise. He asked what the girl was doing. Cherin laughed because she was able to surprise her father. Ji Hoon began to say that no matter how different Cherin was from other children, she was still 7 years old. He asked if she even realized how dangerous knives and fire were. He began to say that he had explained to her that she should not play with such things. The girl replied sadly that she was not playing. Then Ji Hoon asked her what she was doing here if she wasn't playing. Suddenly he saw a pile of perfect dishes on the table. Ji Hoon could not understand what it was and who had prepared such wonderful dishes. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened and Ji Hoon's friends were sitting at the table. Yeji asked that Ji Hoon not yell at Cherin. The men said it was not easy to hide. Ji Hoon opened his eyes wide in surprise. He didn't understand what they were all doing here. Yeji told Ji Hoon to change his clothes first, because he was exposed. The man began to cover himself in embarrassment, and the woman laughed at him. She told Ji Hoon that it was a joke and that he should finally come to his senses. Yeji pointed to Cherin and said that he should listen to her. The little girl hugged her daddy happily and said that today was her birthday. So she had prepared everything, because thanks to her mom and dad she was born. Today Cherin wanted to prepare a present for her dad. The man began to say, embarrassed, that it was Cherin's birthday and she shouldn't give him anything. The little girl replied that she was doing it because she was grateful to him for having her. The man was touched by what he heard. It was unexpected for him to receive a gift for no particular reason. He realized what it means to reap the benefits. Yeji began to say that Cherin had come to her a week ago and asked to spend her birthday with her. The girl said she wanted to cook something, but she didn't know how. Ji Hoon thought that Yeji had cooked everything, but the woman denied it and said that Cherin had done it with her own hands. The man could not understand how this was possible. Yeji explained that Cherin practiced in the lab every day while Ji Hoon was away, and the professor paid for the food. Ji Hoon realized that everyone knew about this except him. The woman replied that the whole lab knew about it, so they had to work hard to hide it. Ji Hoon turned to his friends. They also knew about it. They said that Cherin also wanted to celebrate her dad's birthday, which was in March. Yeji said that their biggest fear was that Ji Hoon would wake up early, but he slept like a log. Ji Hoon was ashamed. He realized that his friends had been spying on him to see if he was sleeping. They told him that Ji Hoon had made their plan successful and they had bought a cake to eat together. Yeji said that thanks to them, she had a restful morning. Then Ji Hoon mentioned work. The woman told him that the professor had given him permission to stay home today and spend a nice day with Cherin. The friend said they would not interfere, wished Cherin a happy birthday again, and said goodbye. The girl waved back and thanked them for their help. Cherin offered her dad something to eat because the food was getting stale. The man hesitantly agreed. He was upset. The girl asked why her dad was not eating. She thought it didn't look good. The girl was surprised. Ji Hoon was crying. She did not understand what had happened to her daddy. The man replied that he just hadn't celebrated his birthday in a long time and said he would love to eat. Cherin smiled and asked her dad not to cry. She promised him that she would cook for his birthday as well. Ji Hoon wiped his tears and thanked her. He thought that he was very lucky to have a daughter. Ji Hoon was in some office. Professor Baek Na-hee was sitting in front of him, saying that she had heard that Cherin had prepared a gift for him. Ji Hoon was surprised that she knew about it. So the rumor had spread everywhere. The woman replied that people are interested in everything about Cherin because she is a local celebrity. Ji Hoon asked what brought Baek Na-hee here, because she was definitely not here to have this conversation. The professor reminded him that she had promised to find out about the school. She told him that the Korean National University was engaged in the education of gifted elementary school children. Ji Hoon knew that this university was located in Gangnam. The professor replied that it was the only place that accepted students from elementary school. Ji Hoon thanked her for the information but explained that Cherin was a research subject in Professor Choi Woo-suk's lab. He also thought that Cherin would not leave as long as he was working here. Baek Na-hee replied that she had discussed this with the professor. The man was surprised. He was mentally outraged, because no matter how special Cherin was, she was still his daughter, and he didn't understand why she was being discussed without his consent. He asked the professor why they were discussing where to send the girl without his knowledge. The woman apologized and explained that she was definitely not going to send Cherin to university without his consent. She said that Professor Choi says that Cherin's brain is the future of Korea. A normal curriculum would not make any sense to her. Next year, the girl will start middle school. However, in this situation, a Korean university is the best option. Ji Hoon replied that then Cherin should go there. Baek Na-hee explained that it wouldn't be very helpful for Jinyoung either, but it was worth a try. Ji Hoon then realized that he and Cherin would have to break up after all. Ji Hoon said in embarrassment that in that case they had no choice. Baek Na-hee explained that going to such an institution also made no sense, but it was the law. Ji Hoon realized that he was making a mistake, because after all, he and Cherin would be separated. The man explained that he understood, but to send a girl there so suddenly. He thought it would be hard for Cherin to accept. The professor began to say that this is why she remembered. She mentioned the youth facilities at their school. Ji Hoon felt hopeful. Baek Na-hee told him to think about it, because they had the future of Korean science in their hands. She asked him to think about whether it was really worth sending Cherin to a Korean university. Then Ji Hoon asked if their school accepted not only middle and high school students. The woman replied that it did, but that Cherin was under her jurisdiction. The woman picked up her coffee and said that the principal would not like Cherin changing schools because of their admission requirements. So Baek Na-hee discussed it with the president. She asked him to accept Cherin because she was special. Ji Hoon was speechless with surprise. The woman did not understand her husband's surprise because Cherin had proven that she was worthy of it. In the end, Baek Na-hee received permission, so she needed to meet with Ji Hoon to discuss her entrance exams. The man was surprised because there were no entrance exams in elementary school. Baek Na-hee replied that there was a case in another school where a student entered the 6th grade in November and graduated the following year. Cherin might do the same. Ji Hoon asked if Cherin would also go to 6th grade. The professor replied that she would, because she was very good at math. But they don't have enough titles to officially confirm this. The woman explained seriously that Ji Hoon should know how important they are. Cherin needs to get a title, because it will help her a lot. Baek Na-hee added that if Ji Hoon agreed, she would like to take advantage of the exceptional provisions so that she could go straight to 6th grade. The man thought about it. He knew that titles helped to attract attention. Even if no one had ever heard your name, titles would make them pay attention to you. It would help Cherin if she wanted to get an education. Then more people will concentrate on her thesis. Ji Hoon thought that she should enroll and that she should listen to Professor Baek. The man agreed with her suggestion. He said he was glad they had discussed it and thanked her for her efforts. The professor replied that Cherin was a precious child, so precious that even Professor Choi would do everything legally. Ji Hoon smiled and said that although he was the girl's father, he sometimes wondered if he was doing the right thing by interfering with her future, because she was so smart. Baek Na-hee asked her husband not to say that, because he was the only father she trusted and depended on. He was surprised to hear her say that.